All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about Errol Spence Jr. telling Terence Crawford fans that he and Terence Crawford that he is the only one doing the heavy lifting, and pretty much what that means is more calls of Bud bum bashing. Let's talk about that in this video. Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. Before I get into the subject matter of the video, please make sure to support my sponsor and betting partner, BUSR. You can see the information right down here, busr.ag/Fanon. Use promotional code Fanon, and you will get special benefits for signing up when you deposit money to bet. Now, let's get into this welterweight discussion. We've been having this discussion for a while now, and so pretty much people that are familiar with the channel should know the background. Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. are two of the best fighters in the world, without a doubt. I have Terence Crawford as my #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Errol Spence Jr. is the top welterweight in the world with 2 of the major 4 sanctioned and body belts, and he is going to be fighting Yordenis Ugas for a third coming up in either in the late first quarter of 2022 or the early second quarter of 2022, and what should be a very, very solid fight and one that gets us a step closer towards undisputed. However, because we are in a situation where there's a lot of political volatility, let's put it that way, around this fight, you have a lot of people who are very, very loud. I don't think it's a large number of people. I just think it's a lot of very loud people who actually have the nerve to take issue with Errol Spence Jr. Fighting Yordenis Ugas in a 3-belt unification fight, and are pretty much treating it as if he is ducking Terence Crawford. Now, first and foremost, this is what Errol Spence Jr. said. He takes to Twitter and he says, look, man, I'm doing all of the heavy lifting. Before that, he said, I'm just doing a little straightening up, right? So he's straightening up the division. He's doing the heavy lifting to get all of those belts unified on a path to become the first undisputed champion at 147 pounds. And that I in the 4-belt era, I do believe. I do not think I think Manny Pacquiao might have had 3. Floyd Mayweather Jr. was also one short of it. So I don't know if there's been anybody that has held all 4 belts at the welterweight division. I do not think there has been. If there was, it would have probably been in the it would have been in the 1990s, and that the best candidate for that would have been for Felix Tito Trinidad, who beat Oscar De La Hoya to unify those guys' championship belts. I think that at the time was the IBF and the WBC, but there hasn't been one. So Errol Spence Jr., whether you like him or not, has actually been the one that is going around collecting belts, right? Because he goes and he fights Kell Brook, and that's a championship. He unifies against Sean Porter to get the second, and now he's trying to unify against Yordenis Ugas to get 3. And he said the entire time that that's what his plan was to get that cleaned up, the people that he knew he could make fights with, right? And a lot of people again point to and believe that he said that they want to take the easier fights, and when he clearly meant was that he was going to take the easier route to undisputed. And that meant people that were already on the other side of the street with him. That's why he used the word other side of the street. He said easy route, and he talked about Bob Arum being your promoter, being full of smoke and mirrors, and he didn't call me. That was the entirety of the conversation, and that's what a reasonable person would have interpreted. However, there's a lot of people that just do not like the PBC, do not like Errol Spence Jr., and for some reason can concoct in their mind that unifying 3 belts means you're ducking the guy that has the 4th. Is not ducking him if he's fighting for another belt. However, Errol is being very insistent and saying, look, man, I am the one doing all the heavy lifting. Terence Crawford has not fought anybody of note, of anybody that he hadn't already beaten. Now, a lot of people go and say, well, Terence Crawford knocked out Sean Porter before, and Errol Spence Jr. did not. Yeah, that may be true, but that also does not matter because Errol Spence Jr. already collected that belt. That belt came off of Sean Porter 2 years ago when Errol Spence Jr. fought him. So Bud took a mandatory fight, right, against a guy that did not have a belt. So when you're talking about unifying the division and getting to the point where there's only one champion, Errol Spence Jr. is the guy that's doing the work to get that done. Now, some people will say, well, yeah, that's because Errol Spence Jr. is over at the PBC and those fights are available for him and the fights are not available for Terence Crawford. If you're one of the people that are saying that, then you're one of the people that are agreeing with Errol Spence Jr. and you didn't even know it. If he has the ability to negotiate because he shares a manager with these guys, that makes sense to get done because it is an easier way to collect the belts than it is to go into a negotiation with Bob Arum, who has a track record of not making those fights. So Errol Spence Jr. doing the heavy lifting, Terence Crawford, and he had been, and this is what I'm telling you, people have revisionist history here. Be up until the Sean Porter fight, people were pretty much saying that the man was bum bashing at 147 pounds. If you look at who the guy fought. Now, he fought Jeff Horn coming out the gate, and that is who you win. That's who you beat to get a championship. I didn't have a problem with that, still do not have a problem with it. However, if Terence Crawford was actually chasing specifically Errol Spence Jr. and not belts, then he could have became a mandatory in the IBF. He could have kept his IBF belt a little bit longer at 140 pounds and then moved up and became the mandatory to fight Errol Spence Jr. for the IBF belt. If what he was doing was chasing specifically Errol Spence Jr. He could have also had signed with Al Heyman, which would have crossed the side of the street because he re-signed with Top Rank, knowing that there was a rift between Top Rank and the PBC at the time that he signed. So Terence Crawford made conscious decisions which kept him away from an Errol Spence Jr. fight. He made conscious decisions that kept him away from that fight or made it more difficult to make that fight. So Errol Spence Jr. is 100% right in saying, look, man, I'm doing all the heavy lifting. I'm not sure what you guys are criticizing me for. Once I beat Yordenis Ugas, and I say if he beats, but I'm sure he would say when he beats Yordenis Ugas, he would have put Undisputed right there at the feet of Terence Crawford, because Terence Crawford will more than likely be the WBO champion at that time. Now, if Errol Spence Jr. were to collect all three of the belts and then say, no, I do not want to fight Terence Crawford, then you would probably have something to say. People could say, oh man, he got all three belts and then now he decides he doesn't want that fight at all. He's going to move up to 154 pounds. If he did that, then critics of Errol Spence Jr., in my opinion, would have something to say. But up until that time, not much to say. It is literally impossible to duck somebody while you're collecting championship belts, because the definition of ducking somebody is not doing something that you're supposed to do. If Terence Crawford is not his mandatory and he is fighting another champion, he is doing what he is supposed to do if the goal is to unify a division. If a fight is available for him to take and he takes it and it's against a champion in a major sanctioned body, that is not ducking another champion. Now, if you fight somebody unified but then you leave the division, then you can say that you're ducking because you didn't try to fight the other champion to prove that you were the actual champion. So anyway, to me, all of this stuff, man, just seems to me to be a bunch of guys. I'm liking what's happening in the welterweight division, and I'm loving that Errol Spence Jr. is keeping his word. But that man is 100% right when he says he's doing all of the heavy lifting. And this is going to put Terence Crawford where Terence Crawford would not have had to really fight anybody of tremendous risk. The biggest risk that he's had at welterweight has been Sean Porter, and Sean Porter had already been beaten by 3 other people in that division. So even though he did a better job at beating him, he also was not taking a tremendous risk in fighting the guy because he had already lost his belts and he had already been beaten 3 times by 3 other people. Yordenis Ugas is a guy with a belt. And that is what Yordenis Ugas is. He's a risk, but Errol Spence Jr. should be able to get through that. And on top of it, the man is coming off of an accident for this stuff. I just think you got a lot of people are treating this dude really, really unfairly because he's with the PBC and not because there's some big supporters of Bud. Because whenever it's time to really support Bud in arguments about, him being pound for pound #1, or when he was at 140 becoming undisputed, these people were not there, man. These people were brushing him off and talking about Vasily Lomachenko. But when it's Errol Spence Jr. getting to the point of undisputed, they all of a sudden are Terence Crawford fans, and that's the only thing that is important. Just, it's it's just malarkey. Anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out.